You know, each Friendship is Magic episode has its own flavor to it. Some are sweet, while others leave a bitter aftertaste in everyone's mouth. There's a certain style and flair to what writers bring to the table. So, what flavor did our new writer bring? So, Rainbow Dash is a Wonderbolt now! That certainly came out of nowhere. You know, after Magical Mystery Cure and how near everyone complained about the pacing in that one, I figured the writers might have thought to be a little more careful about making Rainbow Dash a bolt. But then again, it took us 6 seasons to get here, and Rainbow Dash seems to be the character that writers in general have the least knowledge of how to use when it comes to actually giving a crap about character development and preventing character derailment. What I mean by this is, well, I never feel like writers go too far with any other characters, and even when they do, they bring it down by the end to show that everything's okay, give or take a few exceptions. With ego characters in general, writers tend to go very far with their torment because I guess having an ego in and of itself is the worst thing a character can do. Plus, there's always the fact that Dash episodes seem to have a strange fascination with raising stakes extremely high or publicly humiliating her. I'm not sure why every writer enjoys making Rainbow Dash excessively miserable when she's the main character, and giving Rainbow Dash's first season 6 episode to a writer who doesn't write Rainbow Dash often, and a new writer who hasn't written on the show at all was already raising some red flags. Couldn't they have given such an important episode to someone with a little more knowledge in this area, like Merryweather? I know, she wrote Meriduel, but Rainbow Dash was amazing in Wonderbolt's Academy, okay? Actually, considering the Wonderbolt's behavior in this episode, those parts feel like Merryweather's writing. Give or take a few details. I mean, she seems to enjoy those antagonistic characters. Though the story is probably that they showed this idea to Merryweather and she knew that it was a horrible idea and thus didn't want to write it. Ugh, whatever. Regardless of anything, Rainbow Dash's happy face is the best part of this scene.
But now it just serves as a cruel reminder to how quickly everything goes downhill into the mentally challenged depths of Tartarus and poisoning the internal workings of my laptop just by being here.
As an aside, I think Rainbow Dash asking about Wing Bomb is a nice hint to show that she's nervous about potentially screwing up. Even the whole sunglasses bit I think might indicate Rainbow Dash using her ego as a way to cover up her worries. Actually, now that I think about it, a lot of Rainbow Dash episodes have really shown Rainbow Dash falling from her usual "I'm so awesome" mentality. Are we seeing signs of Rainbow Dash having a superiority complex? Actually, that makes a lot of sense, and I need to stop thinking about it because now I'm really sad and it honestly makes this episode even worse to sit through. I have to question the decision to make Rainbow Dash a Wonderbolt now of all times. It's 2 days until tour and they're expecting her to nail the routine perfectly in that amount of time? I mean, if anyone can do it, it's Rainbow Dash, but factoring in wind speed and potential things that could go wrong, you'd think they'd give a newbie a little more time to learn. Even Fluttershy points this out in the episode, so the writers were definitely aware of this fact. Couldn't Firestreak have waited a bit longer to retire or something? I don't know, this just doesn't sit right with me. Okay, so Rainbow Dash still has her fangirl tendencies, so much so that she seems to know the ins and outs of the place. I want you to remember this because it's going to bite this episode in the flank later, okay? Also, apparently, this whole look both ways thing is a new rule to Rainbow Dash. Her inflection seems to imply that she hasn't heard this rule often, though that could just be me. By the way, I want you to remember that flashy entrance line too. Just trust me. Is Spitfire a hypocrite? It's really hard to tell, because she definitely looks one way, but unless this counts as looking the other, it only seems like she looks one way and doesn't bother to look the other way. Rainbow Dash's nervousness is really starting to show here, and it just kind of adds on to before. It definitely blurs the line as to whether Rainbow Dash is hyping herself up out of actual ego, or hyping herself up to alleviate her worries. After all, her image of a Wonderbolt must be a proud and strong kind, so it makes sense that she wants to not look nervous when she finally goes out there. This next part of the episode brings a lot of concerns to my mind. To start off, I don't think Rainbow Dash is in the wrong for wanting to strut her way over to the Wonderbolts. I mean, that whole flashy entrance thing Spitfire talked about that I told you to remember did imply that Rainbow Dash should carry herself with some flair. And honestly, looking both ways is still something that even I struggle to remember. But regardless, the concept and execution feels a little confusing here. For one thing, those Pegasi were flying behind the clouds for a moment, clearly concealed. Even if Rainbow Dash had looked, there's still a chance she wouldn't have seen them. For two, that runway is, like, super long, and this episode's telling me that the Pegasi fly so low to the ground and have so little control over their own flight that they'd crash into some pony if they even dared to cross without seeing them. If anything, I'd encourage having obstacles on the runway as a test for any Pegasus flying so low through it. Or, if the implication is that they're flying so low in order to land, then they take that long to slow down and screech to a halt? Wow, Wonderbolts are kind of pathetic. Not only that, but, I really hate this whole inconvenient timing in a lot of shows. This episode's really telling me that Rainbow Dash just happened to walk out at the perfect time, and those two Pegasi just happened to be crossing the runway at just the right moment for Rainbow Dash to be in their way. And on Rainbow Dash's first day, with the garbage can so conveniently right in front of Rainbow Dash's path so she could crash into it. Um, yeah, sorry, I don't buy that. Though, honestly, if Spitfire hadn't yelled at all, Rainbow Dash probably would have crossed no problem, considering how long she stops and looks to then jump out of the way. She would have felt the gush of wind blowing from behind her, but she still would have crossed. Also, wow, Spitfire looks so angry yelling. Spitfire, you could, seem more worried. No, you're just angry that this newbie is getting in the way of some of your prized Wonderbolts. Well, okay then. By the way, I'd just like to mention that it was Fleetfoot who gave Rainbow Dash the nickname, when it was said back in Sweet and Elite that Rainbow Dash talks about Fleetfoot all the time, implying that she must have really liked her. Yeah. Ouch. I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting a flashback to pre-Cutie Mark Rainbow Dash, but this actually makes me wonder a few things. So, Rainbow Dash was bad at flying at first, and apparently has very bad luck with plot-convenient garbage cans. Perhaps all the teasing was what made her want to become such a skilled flyer in the first place, and the fact that the teacher was laughing too, seriously, what kind of teacher does that, would explain why Rainbow Dash dropped out of flight school. She probably saw how jerkish the school was and gave up on it, also adding some more logic into why Rainbow Dash befriended Fluttershy and Gilda. They were very few of the only kind ones in that entire place and were being bullied too. I swear though, if the Wonderbolts went to this school too, that makes the rest of this episode make way too much sense. To a degree, I can actually buy that this is a triggering name for Rainbow Dash, on the conditions that it's the Wonderbolts who are calling her that. Before, it was ponies that she simply didn't care about and who she knew weren't worth it. Here, her childhood had been brought back to light, and it's the freaking Wonderbolts who are calling her that now. Rainbow Crash was the bullies' way of telling Rainbow Dash that she was a klutz and a failure. She had no reason to believe them, so it was easy to shrug off. Now, with her heroes calling her that, she feels like she has to believe it, because the Wonderbolts are like perfection in her eyes, and whatever they say, she wants to follow. Also, since I know that someone's going to bring it up if I don't mention it, I'll address the issue right now. I don't care if this is a thing that happens in other areas. If they'd done it properly, next to no one should have taken issue with this. And this is a show for kids, where it needs to be explained to a deeper degree than the little that this episode gives, or at least presented in a better light. People are split on how to feel about this episode for a reason, after all. Side note, Soren is the only one nice enough to ask Rainbow Dash if she's okay. Don't get used to this, because it is not going to happen for the rest of the episode. Okay? Okay. Considering the treatment he got during Rainbow Falls, it honestly wouldn't surprise me if the Wonderbolts see Soren as somewhat below them, or Soren himself may be laughing to just follow the crowd. He does look pretty uncomfortable laughing along. I don't really like how Spitfire instantly assumes that Rainbow Dash didn't look both ways. She only noticed Rainbow Dash as she was crossing, so who's to say that Rainbow Dash looked and just didn't see those Pegasi because, there are giant clouds in the way! Also, no pony got hurt, huh, Spitfire? You're not going to, follow up on Soren's question, make sure Rainbow Dash isn't actually injured. Just because she stood up okay doesn't mean her wings aren't hurt or she isn't feeling sore. Oh, wait, right, sorry. That would imply that you actually think that Rainbow Dash is some pony at all. No pony is in, no pony you care about or think of as an actual living being. Right, I remember now. Seeing this montage of crash upon crash upon crash followed by Fleetfoot saying it casually in an effort to convince us that she's an actual character instead of nothing more than a face needing to be pounded into the ground, this is yet another thing I want you to remember for later, okay? Wow, so Worst Flyer has to clean up the compound? Honestly, considering that Rainbow Dash is fangirling earlier, implying that she should know a lot about the Wonderbolts, and yes, we'll get to that later, how interesting that Rainbow Dash doesn't know about this role. If anything, it wouldn't surprise me if Spitfire conveniently made it up. Even if she didn't, though, that's kind of a jerk move if you consider that the worst flyer of the day could have been potentially sore or injured or under some mental stress that's hampering their flight capabilities. You know, like what's happening here with Dashi. And then has to end up cleaning the entire compound on top of that? Like, seriously? Wouldn't it be easier and more promoteful of teamwork if all the Wonderbolts cleaned up together? Then again, that would actually imply that Spitfire was interested in anything more than putting Rainbow Dash down and keeping her out of the loop until it was absolutely necessary, which I know isn't true. The fact that they're so smug about it doesn't help matters. Aw, so her friends threw her a party! That's so sweet! And then very sad when noticing how absolutely down Rainbow Dash looks. Like, geez, just comparing it to before she left. Yikes. Not to mention her utter surprise and inflection when she sees her friends all happy for her. Not really surprising for me, though, since Rainbow Dash has been treated like an utter failure all day and would naturally be shocked to be greeted with anything besides cruel laughter or rude remarks. Nice detail that Fluttershy was the first one to ask what was wrong. She'd been Rainbow's friend for the longest, after all. I wonder if she recognizes the expression in her eyes. I mean, I'm sure she's had that look before back when she was bullied. By the way, that sad Rainbow Dash face makes me want to cry. Seriously. Pinkie Pie actually brings up a good point. Why didn't they call her Rainbow Trash? Both situations involved the garbage can. I wonder that, and then I remember that these writers don't care about that because they literally brought up their own faults in this episode. Good job. If I might add, interesting that it is not Rainbow Dash's idea to do something to stand out. It's Rarity's. I'm saying this now because the rest of the episode will try to convince you that it's a bad idea to follow that, and that such a harmless statement can be blown out of proportion so easily. I really hope that no kids will get the idea that trying to stand out is a bad thing from watching this episode, or that following your friend's advice is a bad thing to do. This is unfortunately where my feelings towards the others for this episode start to dwindle. They should know the risk of Rainbow Dash taking their advice too literally or too hard. I really wish one of them, preferably Twilight or Fluttershy, would have gone to the Wonderbolts and explained to them what happened in Rainbow Dash's childhood. I mean, it would have been a great opportunity for Fluttershy's character to show that she's willing to stand up for others. Heck, if they wanted so badly to make a joke about it, have her approach Spitfire from behind right after Rainbow Dash is doing her Fluttershy impression. Then Fluttershy tries to get Spitfire's attention and she mistakes her for Rainbow Dash until she turns around. I don't know, just something! It just kinda bothers me how the others do so little in this episode besides giving Rainbow Dash bad advice. Oh, and making Rainbow Dash land in a pile of cotton candy. That too. We'll get there when we get there. Speaking of Rainbow Dash's impressions, oh, sweet Celestia, the cringe. Like, I have never cringed this much in my entire life. I hate cringe comedy, and I get secondhand embarrassment like you wouldn't believe. I absolutely cannot stand humor revolving around a character embarrassing themselves like that. Also, while I hate the writer for doing this to Rainbow Dash, it's almost sweet in a way. That she's imitating her friends, I mean. She admires them to such a degree that she thinks the Wonderbolts will like her more if she acts like her lovable friends. Don't get me wrong, it's still depressing as all heck that Rainbow Dash thinks that her friends' personalities are arguably better than hers, but still, it's something to think about. By the way, this was done better in the Griffinstone episode, in my opinion. Also, Spitfire doesn't question Rainbow Dash's mannerisms and just tells her that the behavior needs to stop. Once again, proving that she's a soulless entity disguised as a pony. Oh, and those two ponies in the back. You know, I could think of another pony who could really use that massage considering everything that happened yesterday. No, just gonna look out for the teammates who you think of as actual ponies because some teammates are more on your team than others apparently. Okay then. If you haven't left your screen in horror before Rainbow Dash was done with her impressions, you'd see more examples of how cruel Spitfire is about this. Oh yeah, maybe this will help motivate you, she says, knowing that Rainbow Dash hates the nickname and would be initially excited to see the jacket. Screw you, you flame-broiled twit! Also, yeah, that laugh she gives as she leaves, you know she's enjoying this. I don't care if you're annoyed with Rainbow Dash Spitfire, that doesn't give you a right to be a sadist who enjoys seeing her teammates miserable. Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get to a lot of things. I can't believe this! I can't even believe this! The Wonderbolts made Rainbow Dash cry! And this episode's telling me that none of the Wonderbolts did a single thing when Rainbow Dash was leaving. None of them noticed or tried to talk to Rainbow at all. Look, There's being oblivious, and then there's just not caring. Rainbow was clearly in some sort of distress and was obviously lying when she tried to give her reasoning to Spitfire. Even if they're trying to knock her down a peg, there are better ways than this. Call her into the office, sit her down, and really talk to her. If she's exhibiting strange behavior, you don't have to punish her, but just don't tell her to stop and expect that to work. You need to explain what she's doing, have her tell the truth and why she's doing it, and then sort out the issues that come out of it. I feel like quite a few Rainbow Dash episodes suffer from this. Rainbow Dash is bold and reckless, acting before thinking or just generally fooling herself. You need to be firm with her and finally get things through to her head. Okay, so Scootaloo said that the whole Rainbow Dash fan club was going to see Rainbow Dash fly, and I hardly see any fillies here. Did the club really derail that badly from the whole Mare-Duel incident? No flags, no signs, no "I love Rainbow Dash" anywhere? I've kind of questioned why the rest of Rainbow Dash's friends didn't do anything when Rainbow avoided the suggestion that practice went well. I mean, Applejack, Pinkie Pie, and Rarity I can understand because they can't fly, but Fluttershy or Twilight didn't think to do anything, even when they saw that Scootaloo wasn't being placed back with them? Moving on to Rainbow's plan, it's confusing. I think the writer is purposely trying too hard. So, Scootaloo kicks the cloud into Rainbow's path, which means right in front of her, but then Rainbow immediately contradicts it by saying that the lightning bolt will go off behind her. Judging from what we've seen before on the show, the kick activates the lightning bolt, which would mean that the instant Scootaloo kicked it, the lightning bolt would go off and that'd be the end of it, right? Writers, I understand that you think Rainbow Dash is dumber than a sack of bricks, but she's not, okay? And trying to pretend like Rainbow Dash would actually say things in these exact words flushes your credibility down the drain. I don't think that doing a big stunt after the routine in and of itself is out of character, but the execution is what sets me off. Also, when you see Scootaloo's reaction, it's blatantly obvious where this is going to go. The least the writers could have done is have Scootaloo be a little more blind and not really thinking about this to give the illusion that this might go well. Whoa. So the Wonderbolts didn't bother to find Rainbow Dash or anything like that? They just started the routine without her? I mean, the routine started about 10 seconds later, but seriously? Did none of them even care that Rainbow Dash wasn't right there? I'm assuming Rainbow said she'd catch up when the routine started, but it's still a little distracting. With Spitfire being so against Rainbow Dash, you'd think she'd go yell at Rainbow to hurry her flank up. This is just a problem with me, I think, but it bothers me a little how Pinkie Pie is getting sweets while the show is going. It's obviously just a ploy so Rainbow Dash can crash into it later, but it also kind of makes Pinkie Pie look a little inconsiderate. She's missing out on seeing Rainbow Dash flying so she can satisfy her sweet tooth. I don't understand this impressiveness that the Wonderbolts are portraying. I mean, I've seen Rainbow Dash do some pretty cool stunts, and they're way more impressive than this. I'll get to that later, though. Alright, now let's get to this. Firstly, you're telling me that Rainbow Dash went through all the effort to perform the routine perfectly, and is even later stated to be the most talented flyer out of the Wonderbolts, yet she apparently mistimes her cue, or something, and screws up this badly? Anyone remember Wonderbolts Academy where she could so easily recover after being flung around by the Dizatron, or did the writers choose to completely forget about it? Actually, I'm guessing that the writers didn't watch Wonderbolts Academy at all. Testing 1, 2, 3 told us that Rainbow Dash sees everything when she's flying, yet she didn't know that tree was in that specific position. Also, more perfectly inconvenient placement! Yay! Gotta love how no one bothers to check on Rainbow Dash or ask if she's okay. They just kind of watch as she lays there in pain and agony. Look, Polsky, you've written a very considerate and nice Pinkie Pie in Too Many Pinkie Pies. No matter how awesome that might have looked, Pinkie Pie should have known that Rainbow Dash was in pain. The rest of the main six might just be in shock, but at least show one of the Wonderbolts caring at least a single bit about Rainbow Dash. Maybe if Soren stepped forward to ask if she was okay, but Spitfire stops him to scold Rainbow. Which would still be stupid, but I'll touch on why later. My point is, the only signs of care we've seen is one line from Fleetfoot, which means virtually nothing since she's the one who started this stupid farce. And Soren in the very beginning, which was followed up with nothing afterwards. Help her stand up. Wipe some of the cotton candy from her face. Do something! So Rainbow Dash is all bandaged up now and the rest of the Wonderbolts show up. This scene is here to show you that neither Spitfire nor the other Wonderbolts give a flying feather about Rainbow Dash or her injuries. Really, Spitfire? Not a, how are you feeling? Or an, are you feeling okay now? Before you scold her? If Rainbow Dash had, I don't know, died, would you just be standing there like, wow, what a newbie. Wish you were alive so I could scold her? Ugh. It's also made worse when you realize that one of the Wonderbolts could have just flown up to stop Rainbow Dash's careening and probably just chose not to because it was funny. Might I also add that not a single one of the Wonderbolts seemed to see Rainbow Dash giving the signal to Scootaloo, but then Spitfire immediately assumes that Rainbow Dash added on to the routine in this scene. You know, from my perspective, just seeing this scene alone with no context, it merely looks like Rainbow Dash was just going to clear that lightning cloud out of the way of any civilians, but then got scared and flew off. If Scootaloo told them, then two things. Number one, I doubt Scootaloo would, knowing that Rainbow Dash could get in trouble for it, and two, you need to show that, or it just looks bad. After all of the pain Rainbow Dash had gone through for this whole episode, why not have her pull off an awesome routine, but Spitfire is upset anyway for her changing it? You don't have to embarrass her to such degrees. She can learn a lesson, yes, I'll get to that, without having to constantly give her a bad spotlight in front of other ponies. Also, excuse me? Putting other ponies at risk? How? In Wonderbolt's Academy, Rainbow Dash was fully aware that the tornado was a poor idea, so unless the writers didn't watch Wonderbolt's Academy, like I said earlier, she most likely put the cloud far enough away from others. Considering how far she seems to fly off with Scootaloo and how far away Soren seems to be looking, the lightning cloud was probably at a fair distance. So yeah, the only pony she hurt was herself. You know, as the episodes go on, it really becomes apparent to me that Spitfire doesn't care whatsoever about Rainbow Dash's pain. She seems to just blow it off as, well, she saved the world a bunch of times, so she shouldn't feel anything from this unless she's a total wimp. Take some responsibility! Now, let's just talk about the sheer ridiculousness of explaining the nicknaming thing now of all times. Firstly, remember back in the first few minutes of the episode where Rainbow Dash was fangirling about the Wonderbolts compound? Yeah, so this episode's telling me that she doesn't even know the Wonderbolts' nicknames? Made worse by the fact that we hear Crash more than 15 times in this entire episode, and she hasn't heard any of the other nicknames being uttered even once besides Soren's? No, I'm sorry, but I cannot buy that one bit. That's a load of horse apples, and you know it, episode. Also, how convenient that Soren's nickname is the only one that Rainbow Dash learns before now, because the vast majority of the Wonderdolts' nicknames cannot be misconstrued as a positive nickname so easily. No, we had to spend another 6 minutes seeing Rainbow Dash suffer. For those who still defend this, I want you to imagine another scenario. Let's say it wasn't Rainbow Dash. If it was Fluttershy, would you still see this episode in the same light? This is a legitimate question, by the way. I'm not assuming everyone will instantly be on my side here. If Fluttershy had Rainbow Dash-like dreams and wanted to be a Wonderbolt, but her personality remained roughly the same, and through whatever reasoning, she put herself through the same steps that Dash did, would you see the Wonderbolts in the same light? If we saw Fluttershy back at her house crying and miserable because the Wonderbolts made fun of her, would you still see the Wonderbolts in the same way? Rainbow Dash isn't much of a crier, so much of her pain is on the inside. We don't know how horribly she's actually feeling because she tries not to show it outwardly. I'm not going to start off listing mental disorders and say that Rainbow Dash has this or Rainbow Dash has that, but there are disorders in our world at the very least that would make it extremely difficult or nigh impossible for someone in this situation to not be deeply affected by it. As someone with anxiety and depression, this would seriously mess me up. And unless Wonderbolts check for this stuff before inviting new members in, someone could get in with their team and be seriously screwed up by all the name-calling. It's actually a bit sick to think of what this would be like if Rainbow Dash's personality was anywhere closer to Fluttershy's. I can't stand how the Wonderbolts never have to own up to their actions. The only thing they get is their show being derailed by Rainbow Dash's failure. I don't care that they didn't know what they were doing. They should at least apologize for keeping Rainbow Dash out of the loop. And no, I'm not saying that Rainbow Dash should get special treatment, but at least have them show some signs of regret. They don't have to stop calling her Crash, although I would prefer it, but at least give an apology for not seeing these issues Rainbow Dash was having and promising not to leave her out of stuff like this. They never learn the impact of their actions, and the only time they actually do anything is when Rainbow Dash calls them out on it. Wonderbolt's Academy is a perfect example for this. Spitfire doesn't do jack until Rainbow Dash finally throws in the towel. Can't risk losing such an elite flyer and have your team's name be tarnished. Can you, Spitfire? It doesn't help that she yells at Rainbow Dash at first there, so it just ends up looking like she's trying to save face. Okay, so the Wonderbolts know that Dash is a good flyer and didn't consider asking her why she was screwing up so bad. You don't think that she might actually be emotionally unstable or even that she might be physically hurt, which would thus put a damper on your tour and thus you should have probably considered giving her a freaking break? This is just so stupid. Even when Rainbow Dash was being egotistical in the beginning, she was still offering Spitfire advice on making the team better, not making herself stand out. The only time she was showboating was when these Wonderbolt losers were mocking her. If you give her a reason for being a showboat, then the argument doesn't hold up nearly as well. If Rainbow Dash wasn't being picked on and was just showboating constantly, I wouldn't care, but she was only doing it because of you guys. It took a lot, Show, but you finally did it. You finally made me hate the Wonderbolts. Are you happy now? They seemed great enough at first, but after failure, and then all this behavior that was going on, by the way, it doesn't help that they mention her saving the world when they instantly turned on her back in Rarity Investigates and assumed that this great savior element of loyalty would send a forged letter. I find it extremely difficult to see any redeeming qualities in any of these dolts. Soren, maybe, but I'm struggling even with him now, despite how he was treated in Rainbow Falls, and Spitfire has officially become my least favorite character in the entire show. Can we just talk about how mixed the moral is in this episode? I mean, from what I can tell, it stems from the line Rainbow Dash says about being a standout flyer, but now being okay to fit in since she's on a team. First off, yeah, kids, do whatever you can to fit in. Don't try to stand out. Secondly, how does this episode want me to look at this? Because Twilight said earlier that they're on a team who stand out in their own ways, but now this episode is telling me that it's a bad thing, and that Rainbow Dash should just follow the other Wonderbolts exactly and have no special traits of her own? I mean, Rainbow Dash flies all the time, and she doesn't have the windswept hairstyle like the other Wonderdolts do, so it's obviously something that's styled to look that way and make each Wonderbolt look similar. Actually, now that I think about it, seeing so many similar hairstyles kind of reminds me of... Oh. Thirdly, and most importantly, yeah, teamwork! Let's talk about what a great team these Wonderbolts are! What great teamwork they must have to not properly communicate and be knocked out by a flailing Rarity. What great teamwork they must have to immediately be trapped by a giant greedy Spike. What great teamwork they must have to completely disregard Rainbow Dash being hurt. What great teamwork they must have to blatantly lie about the tryouts in Rainbow Falls in order to get Rainbow Dash on their side. What great freaking teamwork they must have to immediately turn on someone who's practically one of their own at the slightest provocation. What amazing, fantastical, out-of-this-world teamwork they must have to not let one of their own in on something that should have been explained from the get-go. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Wonderbolts, owner of the Most Incredible Team Award. Because, I mean, when you're such an awesome team and trying to promote a moral on such a thing during an episode, there's no need for you to even mention the word teamwork, talk about being a team at all, or even explain about working together in the slightest until the very end of the episode. Yeah, Soren, Wonderbolts look out for each other. Oh wait, except when they don't. Moving on, the end of the episode concerns me, to say the least. After quitting the Wonderbolts once before, Rainbow Dash probably wouldn't be likely to do it again in fear of looking like a total quitter. This is her dream after all, and it would be a waste for all of that to be for nothing, right? So, who's to say that Rainbow Dash isn't just feeding off of her hype? Is it out of the question to wonder if Rainbow Dash is blinded by her desire to be a true Wonderbolt that she can't even see the issues right in front of her? Would it be too far-fetched to suggest that Rainbow Dash is still struggling to comprehend what was happening? I mean, teasing is one thing, but not everyone enjoys being teased or jabbed at. Just because one has good intentions doesn't mean it won't make the one being teased uncomfortable. And Spitfire's line about teasing Rainbow Dash for years, which makes me want to punch her in her smug face, by the way, doesn't instill much confidence that this won't have an internally bad effect on Dashi, especially with her nervous expression in response to it. She's cleaning up the place herself, I mean. Even though she rejects help from the others, I don't think I'd be very surprised if Spitfire had just put those words in her head and demanded that she do it alone. Something I've wanted to ask for a while, actually. For a long time now. Ever since I started seeing the Wonderbolts partake in shifty behavior, and as I started to realize how important Rainbow Dash's dream was to her. Dashi, why do you want to be one of them? We always hear you talk about how great being a Wonderbolt is, or how great it would be to be on their team, but what we never hear is why. Why do you want to be on a team who have the same hairstyles and outfits, their only difference being in color and name? Why would you have desire to join a team that relies on synchronized movements and never focuses on each individual team member's special abilities? Rainbow was right about one thing. She is a standout flyer. It's what she's good at. She's probably the fastest Pegasus in all of Equestria, and her rainbow mane and tail are things that instantly attract attention. When you see her in her Wonderbolts uniform, standing next to the rest of her team, she sticks out. She doesn't have the same hairstyle, and her colors are so bright that it's hard not to focus on her. I really do think that Rainbow Dash needs to get her own team, and become the leader of that. A team that focuses on each individual's special talents and prides itself on each pony's unique traits. A team where even a Pegasus like Scootaloo could have some sort of use or place. Rainbow Dash would be amazing for it. I mean, she's a great motivator. And given a little modesty along with working out her issues, could become an amazing leader. She was given the role of lead pony by the end of Wonderbolts Academy for a reason, right? The sad truth, though, is that now she's stuck on a team where she doesn't belong. A team where she's doomed to stand out and never fully be able to perform tricks that she's made herself. With such synchronicity forced among the team, a Sonic Rainboom can't happen. The Buccaneer Blaze can't happen. Her fastest flight speed can never be shown. Now, she's forced to fit in, to blend in with the other Wonderbolts, and just become another one of them. On such a team, she can't show off how special she is, and will never hear ponies calling her name as they now generalize her into the Wonderbolts as a group. I guess, in the end, the dream wasn't what it could have been. Rainbow Dash cleans up the mess by herself, with none of the Wonderbolts around to help to show that they care about her or see her as more than just someone to fly with. The Wonderbolts themselves being a team who only want her for the good she brings and thus reject everything else. I'm sorry, Rainbow Dash. I'm sorry things ended up like this. I'm sorry that everything was so against you and you were derailed, made to look like a fool. I'm sorry that you're part of a team where you're unable to show off your true talents and skills, therefore being inevitably unhappy, no matter how much you delude yourself. I'm so sorry.